That night is a memory that still shakes me to my core. And aside from law enforcement and a handful of family members, this is the first time I've ever truly gone back over it in full. Several years ago, during a gap year between finishing high school and starting college, I landed my first job at a gym that never closed. Because it operated 24 hours a day and required a key card for entry, I was often scheduled for overnight shifts when only 1 or 2 staff members were on duty. Members would swipe in, work out and leave on their own, since the entire building was largely automated. Every door entry, exit and machine usage was tracked digitally, which meant my job mostly involved sitting in the office watching the security feeds, occasionally walking the floor, wiping things down, and exchanging small talk with whoever was around. The gym sat in a rough neighborhood, but surprisingly, the regulars were usually polite, and since traffic was low, most people knew each other by sight. On this particular night, I was scheduled from 8 in the evening until 6 in the morning, a shift that was usually dull and dragged on forever. What unfolded during those hours, however, still keeps me awake years later. It was roughly 2 in the morning, after I'd already completed several walkthroughs and finished all the routine tasks, and I was completely drained. I decided to sit back down and keep an eye on the monitors. At first, nothing seemed out of place. A few familiar faces came and went, which wasn't unusual. By that point, I had been working there long enough to recognize almost everyone, except for one man who caught my attention when I noticed him on a treadmill tucked away in a distant corner. New faces weren't rare, but something about him stood out immediately. He was running at an unnerving speed. I pulled up the machine's data on the system and saw he was moving at 9 miles per hour, which alone was impressive, but what truly unsettled me was that he never slowed down. 10 minutes passed, then 15, and his pace never changed. When I zoomed in on the camera feed, I couldn't quite put my finger on why, but everything about him felt wrong. His clothes were torn and filthy, his hair long and unkempt, and his expression never shifted. He stared straight ahead, unblinking. Then I noticed he wasn't wearing shoes. He had been sprinting barefoot at full speed for over 15 minutes, eyes fixed forward, completely expressionless. By then, every other patron had left, and it was just him and me in the building, which made the situation even more disturbing. I reminded myself that gym policy required footwear, and I used that as justification to approach him, even though every instinct told me not to. The treadmill was positioned just outside the employee hallway, so I stepped out of the office and turned the corner, and my stomach dropped. The machine was smeared with blood. His feet were shredded, leaving wet splashes and streaks with every pounding step. Blood dripped and sprayed from his ankles, yet his face remained blank, mouth stretched open as he ran. He looked completely unhinged, like someone under the influence of every substance imaginable, and fear took hold of me. Despite that, I forced myself to shout at him to stop, raising my voice just to be heard over the relentless thudding of his feet. He didn't respond, didn't look at me, didn't even flinch. He kept running, staring forward, mouth agape. I shouted again, asking what he was doing, and without breaking stride or sounding winded, he rasped out a single sentence. "Are you there?" His voice was cold, harsh, and unnatural. I told him to stop again, and each time he repeated the same words while the pool of blood at the back of the treadmill continued to spread. At that point, I decided I needed the police. I retreated to the office, grabbed my phone, and before dialing, glanced back at the screens. He had turned his head and was staring directly into the camera, still sprinting, still bleeding, mouth wide open. I looked away, just as I heard him screaming outside the office. Raw, wordless screams at full volume. Moments later, he jumped off the treadmill without even shutting it down and vanished from that camera's view. I frantically cycled through every feed, trying to locate him, but he had disappeared from all of them, except one. In the employee hallway feed, he was standing less than 6 feet from the office door, completely still. I have no idea how he got into a restricted area without a keycard, but I immediately locked the door. Barely 5 seconds later, the handle began to shake violently. I called the police as he screamed again and slammed against the door, his voice so deep and distorted it barely sounded human. Dispatch told me officers were 5 minutes away while I crouched in the corner, convinced I wouldn't survive if he got inside. The screaming went on for several minutes before abruptly stopping. The door fell silent. When I checked the cameras again, he was gone. The police eventually arrived, and I refused to step out until they searched every inch of the building. They never found him. After answering their questions, I went home, quit the job the next day, and never returned to that gym. I still don't know what that man wanted or what he was capable of, and I often think about how different things could have been if I hadn't locked that door. I finished college about 8 months ago with a communications degree, which, as you can probably guess, has done wonders for launching my professional life. Yes, that's sarcasm. I'm still living under my parents' roof, and I haven't managed to land anything resembling a real job yet, so clearly I'm thriving. For now, I scrape by driving for Uber and Uber Eats, sometimes juggling both in the same night depending on demand. It's not exactly a dream path, but it pays the bills and gives me at least the illusion that I'm moving forward while I try to figure out what I'm doing with my life. Most of my driving happens late on weekends, Friday and Saturday nights, usually starting around 9 and going until 2 or 3 in the morning. When surge pricing hits and drunk college kids need rides home from downtown bars. It's not officially an overnight job, but it feels like one. This happened just a few weeks ago on a Saturday night, sometime around 1:30, when I was exhausted and ready to log off for the night. I was literally about to shut the app down when one last ride request popped up. The pickup was downtown, which didn't bother me, but the destination was way out past the suburbs, farther than I usually like to go. I almost declined it, but the payout was too tempting to pass up. The passenger, a young woman, seemed completely normal, and the drive took about 40 minutes. By the time I dropped her off, it was after 2 in the morning, and suddenly I found myself alone in the middle of nowhere with a long, empty drive back toward anything familiar. I turned the car around and started heading back, and maybe 10 minutes later, I spotted a vehicle stopped directly in the road with its hazard lights flashing. As I got closer, I saw 2 figures standing in front of it, waving frantically like they were trying to get my attention. My instinct told me to keep driving, but I've never been good at ignoring people who might need help. Against my better judgment, I slowed down, stopped about 20 feet away, and cracked my window just enough to hear them without giving anyone access to the inside of my car. They were a middle-aged couple, which eased my nerves at first, right up until the woman started speaking. She seemed panicked, but there was also something oddly practiced about her tone, like she'd delivered this warning before. She claimed they were stopping drivers because a bridge up ahead had collapsed earlier that day, saying they'd nearly driven straight into it themselves. She gestured toward the dark road ahead and told me that if I kept going, I'd end up in the river. I asked what I was supposed to do instead, and this time the man spoke, explaining that there was a turnoff before the bridge that cut through the woods. He said it wasn't ideal and would add time, but it would reconnect me with the main highway and keep me away from the bridge. I thanked them and drove on, but almost immediately, something about the encounter didn't sit right with me. I couldn't explain why, but I decided to trust my instincts and continue the route I'd originally planned. About a mile later, I passed the turnoff they'd mentioned, a narrow dirt road barely wide enough for a single car, vanishing straight into thick trees. I kept driving, and a few minutes after that, I reached the bridge. I slowed down, expecting damage, but it was completely intact. No collapse, no signs of trouble at all. I crossed it without issue and rejoined the main highway shortly after. Nothing bad happened, but the situation rattled me enough that I barely slept that night. I kept replaying it, wondering what might have happened if I'd followed their directions and driven down that dirt road alone in the dark. A few days later, curiosity overpowered common sense, and I drove back out there in broad daylight. I retraced the same route, and of course the couple was gone. When I reached the turnoff, I noticed something new, a sign nailed to a tree right at the entrance that read, "Dead End." It definitely hadn't been there that night. I would have noticed, even in the dark. Someone had put it up recently. I sat in my car staring at the path, which looked far less threatening during the day, just a dirt track disappearing into dense woods. I considered driving down it, but worried about getting stuck, so I decided to check it out on foot instead. I wasn't scared at all at first. With the sun out, it didn't feel dangerous. But the moment I shut off the engine and stepped out of the car, a wave of dread hit me. I stood at the edge of the path trying to see farther in, but there wasn't much to see. Something about being out in the open made me hesitate, and just as I turned around to head back, a scream tore through the woods behind me. It was unmistakably a woman's scream, distant but raw, echoing from somewhere deep down that dirt road. I don't remember deciding to run. I just did. I was back in my car and gone before my brain could catch up. I've never been that scared before, and that was about 2 weeks ago. I haven't returned since, but I can't stop thinking about it. Part of me knows I should let it go, but another part keeps wondering what that scream was and who those people really were. I've even thought about asking a friend to go back there with me, and if I do, I'll record it and send the video. Until then, all I can do is wonder. My name is Thomas, and for the past couple of years I've been working overnight shifts at the Burger King near my house. It's nothing impressive, but it covers my rent and the schedule suits me since I've always been more alert at night anyway. Sitting at the drive-through window from 10 at night until 4 in the morning doesn't bother me the way it would most people. This whole situation began about a month ago, during a night when I was running the drive-through alone, which is pretty common after midnight because we're always short on staff. A car pulled up to the speaker and a man placed an order in a completely ordinary voice. A large double Whopper with cheese combo and a Coke. Nothing about the order stood out. When he came to pay, though, he only lowered his window enough to slide his card through, and the glass was so darkly tinted that I couldn't see his face at all. He paid, I handed him the receipt, and then he just drove away without stopping at the pickup window for his food. I waited with the bag for a while, assuming he might circle back, but he never did. Eventually, I set the food aside and ate it myself later. People act strangely at drive-thrus all the time, so I didn't dwell on it. About a week later, the exact same thing happened again. The same meal, the same routine, payment at the first window, and then the car leaving without collecting the food. I remember thinking it was odd that someone had done the same thing not long before, but I chalked it up to coincidence. The third time it happened, I finally realized it had to be the same person. By then, I knew it was unusual, but I wasn't exactly upset. The meals were paid for, already made, and I was the one benefiting from them. So I kept accepting the free Whoppers and tried not to question why some stranger kept buying food and abandoning it. This pattern continued for several weeks. Every 4 or 5 days, always late at night, usually between 1 and 3 in the morning, the same car would show up and place the same order. Weirdly enough, I started to anticipate it, like I was waiting to see if my anonymous sponsor would show up again. Then one night around 2 a.m., I heard that familiar voice come through the speaker and knew immediately what was happening. He ordered the usual meal, but this time he added something else, something that made my blood run cold. He calmly said he hoped I'd been enjoying the Whoppers, then addressed me by my last name, Hurley. My last name isn't on my name tag, isn't displayed anywhere customers can see, and there's no legitimate reason a stranger should know it. I froze, completely silent, my mind struggling to process what I'd just heard. When I finally spoke, I demanded to know who he was, how he knew my name, and what he wanted. I kept repeating myself, but he didn't respond. This time, he didn't even drive forward to pay. I heard his engine rev, and then he sped away. I was shaken for the rest of my shift, and the sense that something was seriously wrong wouldn't leave me. When I got home later that morning, I found a handwritten note sitting on my doorstep. It read, "I know what you did. You have 3 days." My hands were trembling as I stared at it, my stomach twisting with a sick, hollow feeling. I honestly have no idea what it was referring to. I've gone over my life again and again, trying to think of something, anything that could explain it. But I come up empty. I'm not living some double life. I'm 24. I flip burgers for a living, and I spend my free time playing video games. I didn't sleep that night at all. I sat on my couch with every light on, waiting for something terrible to happen. Nothing did, and I eventually forced myself to keep going. The very next night at work, though, he returned. This time, he skipped ordering food altogether. He told me to grab something to write with, and then rattled off an address on the edge of town, somewhere unfamiliar to me, before saying I had 2 days to bring him $10,000. I almost laughed, thinking it had to be a joke, but his tone made it clear he was serious. As soon as he left, the fear hit me again full force. There was no way I could give him that kind of money. I didn't have it and never had. I convinced myself it must be some kind of elaborate prank or scam and decided to ignore it, even though I should have called the police right away. 3 nights later, I thought maybe it was over since nothing had happened. I was wrong. I was at home watching TV when the sound of breaking glass exploded through my apartment. I dropped to the floor, thinking someone was firing shots, but when I checked, I saw a rock had been thrown through my window. Whoever did it was already gone. That time, I called the police and told them everything, including the address I'd been given. They said they'd look into it, but there wasn't much they could do without footage or more evidence. That was 3 days ago. I've called out sick from work every night since, but I know that won't protect me because whoever this is already knows where I live. I can't afford to quit and I can't afford to move, so I'm trapped waiting for this situation to end or escalate. The only thing I can think of is asking the police to trace the credit card used to pay for those meals. Beyond that, I have no idea why I was chosen or what's coming next, and I can only hope it doesn't get worse. This took place several winters ago while I was working as the overnight security guard for a large commercial warehouse complex. I was 26 at the time and had been on the job for about 8 months. My shift ran from 11 at night until 7 in the morning, and I was always the only person on site. There was a supervisor I could contact if something serious happened, but otherwise it was just me alone with the camera system. The warehouses sat in an industrial zone on the outskirts of a small city that basically shut down after dark. Most nights were identical. Clock in, walk the exterior of the buildings, then sit in the security office watching camera feeds, with another patrol scheduled every hour. The facility stored industrial machinery and bulk materials, nothing especially valuable or tempting. The night things went wrong started out like any other. It was cold, with light snow falling, but nothing severe. I completed my first patrol without issue and went back inside. Around 1:30 in the morning, a motion alert popped up from one of the loading dock cameras. That alone wasn't alarming. The system was overly sensitive, and snow, wind, or animals often set it off. I pulled up the live feed and watched for a bit. The dock was empty, floodlights illuminating drifting snow, yet the alerts kept repeating. Every 10 or 15 minutes, the same camera triggered again. Each time I checked, there was nothing clearly visible. What unsettled me was that the motion always appeared to register right at the edge of the frame, as if something was present but deliberately staying out of view. By 2:30, I'd logged 6 or 7 alerts from that one camera, while every other feed remained quiet. At 3 o'clock, I decided to investigate in person. The snowfall had mostly stopped, and the entire complex was eerily silent. I walked the full length of the loading dock with my flashlight and found nothing out of place. All bay doors were locked, and the snow showed only my own footprints. I went back inside, trying to shake the feeling. About 20 minutes later, I heard a harsh metallic scraping noise, like something heavy being dragged across concrete, echoing from somewhere deep inside the warehouse. I immediately checked the interior cameras, but all 6 feeds showed empty aisles. At that point, I was starting to feel like I was being messed with, like something was deliberately staying just out of reach, though I still tried to rationalize it as noise from the building settling or the wind. An hour later, it happened again, louder this time, followed by a sharp impact as if something had slammed into a door. I flipped through the cameras once more. Feeds 1 through 5 were clear. When I pulled up camera 6, the screen went black, flickered with static for a few seconds, and then returned. But the view had changed slightly. The camera angle was off by a few degrees, as if it had been physically nudged. At that moment, I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I grabbed my flashlight and radio and entered the warehouse. The interior was enormous, roughly 80,000 square feet of towering shelves laid out in long corridors. During the day it was brightly lit and busy with forklifts, but at night the lights were dimmed, bathing everything in a dull yellow glow. I was about halfway down the central aisle when I heard footsteps somewhere to my left, the unmistakable sound of a person walking a couple of aisles over. The instant I stopped moving, the footsteps stopped too. I stood there, barely breathing, surrounded by silence so thick it felt oppressive. After what felt like an eternity, I forced myself to speak, announcing loudly that I was security and ordering whoever was there to identify themselves and make things easy. No one answered. The rest of that patrol was pure terror. I was braced for a confrontation that never came, and the longer I searched without finding anyone, the worse it felt, because I knew, absolutely knew, I wasn't alone in that building. Nothing else happened for the remainder of the shift, but that didn't bring any relief. By the time 7 a.m. arrived, I just wanted to leave. I reported everything to my supervisor when he arrived, and maintenance later inspected the entire facility. They found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no explanation for the sounds or the camera shift, and it was obvious that most people didn't really believe me. Even so, that night still stands as one of the most unsettling experiences I've ever had.